Hey, good morning. Granny Gear here for Old Guy on a Bike. I have been thinking about upgrading my road bike for 2025. Yes, I have. I've been thinking about what I would want to do if I was going to, well, we say, look for a slightly sharper knife in a road bike from 2025. If I was going to move off of my Time ADHX, I'm going to be talking about what I'd be shopping for and also talking about, well, the reasons why you may not care about upgrading your road bike this year. Here we go on this Tech Tuesday. Behind me on the workstand is my Time ADHX road bike, which has been my only bike for, I guess really this whole year and maybe a little bit beyond. It's been a great bike to ride. I'm not disappointed in it at all, and yet it had me thinking that maybe if I was going to look for something a little bit different for this year on a road bike, what would that be? What would I want? What would I have to have in a new road bike if I was going to move on? Because I think, in a way, the marketplace is maturing a little bit more to the point where, well, the new road bikes, some of them that are coming out, they have my full attention. So let's talk about what I'd be looking for in a road bike, and then also maybe a little conversation I had with a lady rider in our ride group who's not interested particularly in upgrading her older road bike and why I find that interesting. All right, let's begin with my wish list for shopping for a 2025 road bike. All right, to begin with, what I think has happened in the market is we're seeing some really nice maturing to where it used to be if you wanted a fast road bike, you had to put up with something that was pretty hard-edged, right? Pretty demanding, pretty racy. It would have a very low position. It would have a very firm ride. It was designed for young, fast, powerful riders who don't really care about comfort necessarily. They're very flexible and on, which really isn't me. And yet, what I've seen lately is a softening of the edges of that. We're seeing disc brake bikes now, road bikes that are very light, and yet they're still comfortable. They're pretty aerodynamic, and yet they're not extreme. It's an interesting time in the market. Take, for instance, a couple bikes that stand out in my mind, like the NV Melee and the Specialized Tarmac SL8. Both bikes that have won accolades for not only high performance, decently low weight, and the SL8 very low weight, but also a pretty high degree of comfort where somebody who is still reasonably flexible and willing to put up with a slightly more aggressive riding position can have a very enjoyable ride without being beat up the whole day. So it's an interesting time. So here are some of the things that I would be looking at if I could put together in a 2025 road bike. Number one, it would be made from carbon. Now, carbon fiber isn't a material I would choose for every application everywhere. I wouldn't choose it for my full-on bikepacking bike, but for a road bike, I think there is no better application for carbon fiber than in a road bike frame in the cycling world. Why is that? Well, it's light. It's lighter than anything else, and lightweight. If you're going to have a light anything, I want it to be a light road bike. It can be shaped to all kinds of shapes, so aerodynamic shapes, also shaping like wide bottom bracket junctures and yet still having tire clearance. The way you can shape it and lay the fibers in there to still retain shiftness, where if it was metal, it would just be impossible. All of that combined really makes carbon fiber a compelling material for a road bike. It really is, in my opinion, well, king of the road. I would also want it to be decently light. Now, some of that's the components, of course, that you choose, and I didn't choose high-end components in the shifting on this. I did SRAM Rival. Certainly could have spent more money and got that lighter, and I think for this bike I would go at least a notch or two up, maybe not to the tippy top of things, but I would pay attention a little bit more to the parts I use just in order to get the bike weight slightly down because, well, I enjoy riding a lighter bike, and we do a lot of climbing here, so it's not the biggest important thing of a bike, but it adds up. I would want it to have internal cable routing. Now, I don't really necessarily care if it's fully internal, I mean where all the housings and or cable housings or brake housings, etc., all come through the handlebar and then drop through the headset into the frame and go where they need to go. But I would have it to be at least semi-internal cable routing like my Time 80HX has, where it's external on the handlebar and then comes underneath the stem with a little cover and dives through the headset. I think the clean look of that, it's what I've come to used to looking at, and frankly, it's what the marketplace is going to be getting used to. They're just not going to be used to anymore seeing external cables. It will seem odd and kind of messy to the eye of the buyer, if you will. This new bike, it would have internal cable routing. Because not only does it look good to the eye and is nice and clean and out of the way, well, it's a little bit more aerodynamic. And this new bike for me, it's going to have some aerodynamic thought behind it. Now, I don't want a full aero bike, something, you know, like you see the Scott foil or something like that. No. That's a bridge too far in ride quality and performance and weight and whatnot. That's too much for me. No. But I also want it to be a clean, nice silhouette into the wind. I want the frame to have thought behind it for aerodynamics. I want the wheels to have thoughts to aerodynamics to it. I want the rim to be wide. I want the tire to be wider. I want that to be a nice match. I want clean lines throughout the bike, because even though I'm not fast, okay, I'm not a fast guy, I'm still moving through the wind like everybody else is. And I only have so many watts to spare. And as I get older, I'll have even less watts to spare. So why wouldn't I, as a rider who's still a performance rider, just not a real fast one, why wouldn't I want a bike that's giving me the advantage of what I would call free speed, right? Where it's moving through the air cleanly, it's moving through the air with grace. It's not beating me up in the process of doing it, but I'm also not wasting energy because I've got a whole bunch of cables sticking out somewhere, and the bike frame has no thought even to aerodynamics, etc. So it's going to have some aerodynamic thought behind it, or I'm not writing a check. And this bike for 2025, well, it would have electronic shifting on it. For me, for a road bike, it's either electronic shifting or nothing. Now, I don't want that on my mountain bike. You notice I didn't build Project Curly, my bike packing bike, with it. I don't think I want it for that, but for a road bike, absolutely. For a gravel bike, sure. But I could probably do without it on the gravel bike. But on the road bike, it's electronic or nothing. It works so well. It's so repeatable. It's so clean. No wires. That's so easy to manage on the road bike. I'd rather just push a little clicky button than I would have to swing a big old lever. For me, it's reliable enough. I carry a spare battery. I'm never that far from civilization if the thing really does just stop working and give me the blank stare of death. So for me, for the road, it's going to be electronic shifting or none at all. Some of the other little things that I think the frame would have to have. It would have to have pretty decent tire clearance. Now, my 80HX, I can put a 38 on it, maybe bigger, I've never tried. But that's an all-road. That's what you want in an all-road bike, isn't it? But this is a road bike, not an all-road bike. And I'm looking for something a little bit faster and a little bit snappier, and so the geometry probably isn't going to support necessarily a really big tire. But if I can't put a 32 millimeter tire that will probably measure to a 34 on a wide modern road rim, well, I don't think I'd buy that bike, because that is going to be the future. That's the future trend of road tires. I don't know if they're going to get that much bigger than 32, maybe 34. But if it can't handle like a 34 or a 35 as measured with a bit of clearance, I don't think I'd buy it. Also, UDH rear derailleur hanger, universal derailleur hanger. That was a SRAM system they came out with to standardize the derailleur hanger so there weren't 1,000 of them. So if you bend one, a replacement is as close as your nearest well-stocked bike shop. Okay, you could carry one. You wouldn't have to look on some catalog and try and special order your derailleur hanger for all these different hundreds and thousands of bikes that have been made. It was actually quite good, but you know what it led to, of course, was SRAM transmission, which is a way of mounting the derailleur to the frame to where it's encapsulated by the axle. It's very stiff, it's very rugged. You know, the other day somebody just knocked their bike over at the coffee shop on a road bike, and it bent their derailleur hanger a little bit just from a simple fall. And of course, now their shifting's compromised till they get that figured out. What a faff that was. And now with through axle bikes, it's really, really difficult to actually hurt your frame by stressing the derailleur. And so UDH came out really for mountain bikes, which makes the most sense for that. And now they came out with SRAM. It's not transmission, but it is UDH. It's not T-type. It's, what do they call it? Full mount, which is what you see in the SRAM Red Explorer. I can think of the name of it. The SRAM Red Explorer came out late last year with that gravel version of the transmission. Okay, it doesn't have a programmed cassette, but it's still got the way it mounts. Excellent. That's gonna go down in depth into, I'm sure, Force Rival and probably Apex at some point. It'll all be UDH. It's coming to road. It's only a matter of time before road bikes will have that UDH type derailleur hanger, and it won't always be necessarily the new SRAM type transmission type full mount type derailleur, but it will be UDH, and I would not buy a frame that wasn't, because that's going to be the future of drivetrains in no time at all. Now, is there a bike for me that kind of puts all this together in one, all the things I mentioned and maybe a little bit more? Well, take a look at this little teaser video. Now, I didn't tell you a lot, did it? Well, that's because it's a little bit before the official release of this bike, but it's something I have my eye on. It's an interesting bike, and maybe at some point I'll get a chance to throw a leg over that. We'll see what I think of it. But I think you'll be seeing the full release of that bike in a couple of days or so after this video comes up. So keep an eye on that. But in my mind, and for other reasons I haven't gone into, but maybe I will in some other video, hopefully I will get a chance to, it's a compelling bike, and it's the type of thing where I would go, yes, that's got everything I want in it, and maybe even a little more than I hoped for, but it does represent, I think, the modern road bike for really a lot of people. What if you don't want to upgrade? I had a conversation with a lady rider in our Tuesday, Thursday group. Very, very good rider, very competent rider. Nice bike. I don't know how old it is, the road bike, 5 years or so, maybe a little more. Good carbon frame, decent components, not electronic shifting, because back then that wasn't as common. Rim brake, of course, doesn't take a big tire, because bikes just didn't back then, probably a 25, maybe a true 28. And I asked her, you thinking of moving up a road bike so you can use, big tires and tubeless and things? It's kind of nice. And she's like, I don't think I see the need. I don't think I see the need. This bike, it's light. It works really well for me. I don't really get a lot of flats, so tubeless for me, not that big a deal. It's already comfortable, so big tires. And she says, I'm afraid I'll spend the money. I'll get something that doesn't ride as well and weighs more, and I'm not particularly all that interested in upgrading, although I think about it occasionally. And I thought it was kind of an interesting conversation, because by nature, I kind of like trying new bikes once in a while. I guess maybe that comes from being a reviewer for so many years, but it's also my nature. I'd like to try that, So there are some bikes I've had for, like my steel Kurtlow road bike. I don't ride it anymore, but I kept that for a lot of years, and that was my go-to road bike. I'd swap back and forth, and I don't know if I'll ever really get rid of that. And there's, occasionally I'll have a bike that sticks around a long time, but I typically go through a new bike every couple years, new gravel bike or new road bike, whatever. That's kind of typical for me. So to have someone who just says, I don't know, I'm pretty happy the way I am, it's kind of interesting. And so I'm curious, what about you guys? Are you at the point where, even though you've got a several-year-old road bike, that you find that is just good enough and you really are not compelled to upgrade? I'm curious why that is, and what would it take for you to finally write that check and say, okay, I'm ready for a new bike. All right, that's it. That's it for now. It's cold out here on this patio. That wind is blowing right up my, well, you know what, and I think I'm ready to go inside and get warmer. You guys have a great week and/or weekend, and as always, go ride your bikes, even if it's not a new one.